Welcome to our podcast From the Ground Up, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their success, challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you'll be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and here with us today we have Tyrre Burks, the founder and CEO of Players Health. Tyrre, welcome to the show.
I really appreciate you, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Players Health launched an insurance arm of their company in 2020 to cover youth sports programs and fitness clubs across America. They generated $1 million in premiums in year one and will do over $50 million in premiums 4 years later. It's a fascinating story. Make sure to listen to it all the way through. Tyrre, a little bit more about you. You not only lead the company, which is on a mission to create the safest and most accessible environment it's possible for kids to play sports that they love by providing innovative and connected athlete safety and insurance products and services to the youth sports market. Something I think a lot of parents love to hear, because
Right.
so many of us that have families, quite frankly, you drop your kids off and you hope for the best when you come and pick them up, that they've been taken care of, they've been coached well, that they have a great experience, and nothing really bad happens, but you never really know. So before we dive into your company and the inspiration around what made you start it, where are you joining us from today?
Joining from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're based here in Minnesota, but most of our company is remote. But I'm originally from Chicago.
Oh, great. Very cool. Are you a Bears fan by chance, or you're connected to the
Unfortunately, I'm a Bears fan. Fortunately and unfortunately, we're going to have some good years ahead of us, but it's been a rough 6 years.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Well, they got a good quarterback. We'll see what happens.
Exactly.
So great. You're an entrepreneur today. Kind of walk us through your upbringing and what were some of the things that helped influence you to someday become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I grew up in the south side of Chicago. I grew up in the projects. I went to school in the projects, and I grew up literally around that area. And I've always been a big dreamer. I've always wanted to do more. I've always been able to see myself beyond the current circumstances that I had. My mother, I grew up with a single mother. My mother, she had multiple businesses. She used to sell cookies. They call her the cookie ladies, but she was a big baker and make cookies, cakes, all these things. She's selling them at my football games. And she was a hustler. And so I think that was really the foundation of like where my work ethic came from. I'd say the entrepreneurial spirit. I ended up realizing that my grandfather on my dad's side owned a chain of dry cleaners. And I just found this out like probably 6 months ago, but like it's in me. And so, I've definitely I'm an innovator. I'm a visionary kind of dude. And so always thinking about ways that I can think beyond or solve problems that I see happening on a day-to-day basis.
You came from the south side of Chicago and you got into sports. Walk us through the journey of your athletic experiences and the inspiration. We're going to kind of just get straight into this here. Tell us your story.
Yeah. So I said I grew up in Chicago. This was in the time, late 80s, early 90s, gang activity in Chicago was just rampant. And it's even worse today, unfortunately. But when we think about like safety, when you talk about accessibility and safety, like I didn't start playing organized sports until my freshman year of high school. So my mom worked 2-3 jobs most of my life. And, she worked for her boys. It was me and my little brother. We're 10 years apart. So most of my, call it my first 10 years was me. I was the only child. And then my little brother came out of nowhere. And here it is. I got a little brother. But ultimately, sports was really a safe place for me. When I started playing, I got invited to come to a football practice from one of my friends in high school. And I didn't even start playing football until my junior year. I started out a wrestler. I wrestled. I ran track. I swam. And these were things that just kept me busy. It kept me out of the streets. It was a safe environment for me to develop and grow. And throughout that time, I've always had an opportunity. I always had a dream of wanting to do more. I just didn't know what that would be. But sports was the first place I was affirmed. Outside of my mom, this was the first place where someone told me that I could be something, especially coming from where I'm at. I'm not saying I was like the nicest kid or like, did everything right and I was a goody goody. But of course, I was a knucklehead and I had my moments. But this is the first time that I had someone outside of my mom saying, "Hey, Ty, you're good at this sports thing. You're good at wrestling. You're good at football. You could do this at the next level." And it was someone that my coach opened my eyes to those possibilities. And one of the things that I've done throughout my entire life was when I've experienced any good in my life, I clung to it. And that's exactly what I did. Sports was a positive outlet for me, and I clung to it. I showed up early, I stayed late, and football ultimately became the sport that I played. I ended up getting a scholarship to play at a small Division II in Minnesota, which is where I landed here, how I met my wife, all of these things. And this was the first time, here it is, I'm now out of the hood, so to speak. I'm playing collegiate football, I'm achieving my dream, and I have a really bad injury. And injuries will be a common theme in my collegiate and professional career, in that I had a ton of injuries. My freshman year of college, I was catching a low ball with my head down, and I get hit. I'm paralyzed on the turf, could not move. This happened. This went on for like 45 minutes. It's probably the most bizarre feeling you could ever have, where you literally can't move I thought it was over. I thought I was never going to walk again, at least in that time, because it went on for about 45 minutes. I end up miraculously, feelings start coming back in my fingers. I get up and I walk off the field. And throughout that experience, I thought I was going to, get back on the field immediately, because this same thing actually happened when I was a junior in high school. And I was back out the next possession like nothing had ever happened, was off and going. My coach at high school did no better, but my athletics trainer in college definitely did. I had to see 9 neurologists to come back to play. And I saw the difference between how that injury in high school was managed versus my injury in college. Dramatically different, because I had medical staff, there were policies and protocols being implemented. And here it is, what could have been a catastrophic injury I had was managed properly. I was properly cleared. They switched my position. I was playing inside receiver to outside receiver, and I went on to continue to play. Well, I didn't realize that, I played 4 years college, had an opportunity. I played in Europe for a year in the German Football League, and then I played in the Canadian Football League. I played for Calgary and Saskatchewan. And I played 4 years professionally all in. I had injuries throughout that entire time. I got my bulging disc in my neck led to torn hamstrings, torn ligaments in my toe, broken fingers. Like, all of this happened, and my body just started to fall apart. And I was just having injuries after injury. And I realized at some point I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. Now, during this time, I ended up losing both of my parents, and I had an inheritance of life insurance money that I had saved. And when I decided to hang it up, I was playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I knew I didn't want a regular job. I knew I wanted to go and create something. And the idea wasn't really players' health in the beginning. It was a communication system for sports organizations. I used to have to, because I was in the training room a lot, I'd have to go to training with the athletic trainers. I'd have to be in meetings with my coaches. And there was very little communication that happened between all of these departments. And so I thought that this needed to exist. So I created a system called Team Interval that would allow all of these constituents within the sports team communicate. And within that system was an injury reporting function. And that was the basis of the Foundation for Players' Health. When I first started thinking through this application, I didn't know how to balance a checkbook when I first started a business. Like, I knew nothing about business. I just knew I had this idea. I saw the evolution of technology everywhere. And I knew that was where I wanted to really start to kind of begin my professional career beyond me playing sports. And yeah, I fumbled trying to get a product to market. And really, 3 years into that, trying to figure it out, I recognized that, Players' Health, this injury management tool that was being organically used, was really the source. And it came back to how I started my whole journey with this. These injuries led me to think about what safety would look like for youth sports. And so when I look back, I recognize that sports was a safe place for me. There are kids that want to be the next Tyrre, and that come from where I come from, and sports was that for me. And I recognize that there are kids today coming into environments where they assume that they're safe. And they're experiencing things that show that that may not be the case. And these lives are dramatically changed. So kids are dealing with emotional, physical, sexual abuse, or they're having injuries that go terribly wrong. And that was the foundation of Players Health. That was the impetus for me starting, which is I recognize that here's the positive environment of me coming into a safe environment and all the possibilities, the travel, everything that I experienced through sports. And here it is now, kids now coming into an environment that's not positive. And that experience in sports dramatically changing their life. You take a kid's motivation away, you take their confidence, their innocence away. At a certain time in their life, they may not ever get those things back. And the trauma could have a negative effect on their lives. And so my focus in building Players Health around safety was around, we want to make sure that sports are giving kids only the positive things that we want sports to give them, and not withdrawing or taking something away from them that they may not ever get back.
Yeah, that's great. Such an inspiration. What are some of the things that you do? So, for example, you have a kid that plays soccer or plays football or plays in some youth organization. How do you take the risk away, for example, from the coaches that begin to coach in those leagues? Or what are some of the tools that the youth organizations are using that come from you that are helping them?
Absolutely. So in running a sports organization, I think very few parents, and I think you alluded to this in your intro, we as parents, we very rarely think about all of the safety requirements that an organization should or shouldn't have. We're just assuming that these things are already in place and I'm dropping my kid. Well, we also recognize that. So when we started with injuries, this was something I was very familiar with. How we manage injuries in youth sports are dramatically different in collegiate sports. So if an injury happens, we wanted to make sure that organizations were following return to play protocols. So if I think about a concussion, that's probably the most widely talked about injury that is happening in youth sports today. A kid has a concussion or a suspected concussion, they need to see a medical professional, and there should be a medical clearance that's required before they can return back to play. Our app would allow them to document that this incident happened, not diagnose it, but document that the injury happened and that here are the things we need to collect before this kid should be allowed back to play. That was the initial app that we built. It's our injury management platform. We actually have one of the largest injury databases in youth sports. Hundreds of thousands of injury reports have been documented in this system, and we've properly tracked athletes back to play. So that was the foundation of what we did. Injuries need to be managed in youth sports. Secondly, in order for you as an adult to come in contact with a minor, we need to make sure that you're credentialed. We need to make sure that you go through a background check, abuse awareness training, concussion training. Are you prepared for the unforeseen things that happen in youth sports? And can you respond properly is what we want to educate these volunteers on. And most of youth sports is volunteer ran and driven. And so that is what we decided to focus on next, which is making sure that adults were properly credentialed before they come in contact with an athlete and that they were prepared to respond properly when things happen. We also happen to be one of the largest background screening providers in this space. This year alone, we've credentialed over 80,000 coaches. And so all of these coaches have to go through their background check, their abuse awareness training, concussion training, before they can get access to their roster. Now, of course, there are some of these pieces were in place, but none of this was being done in one platform with the expertise that was being brought to these organizations at a fraction of the cost that they would normally pay. That was the value we were bringing. How do we make athlete safety affordable? And how do we make it easy for them to do it by actually bringing a team of experts to help them do it? And then lastly, unfortunately, emotional, physical, sexual abuse is extremely prevalent within youth sports because it's a vulnerable market. It's a vulnerable place if you don't have these policies and protocols in place. And unfortunately, we've also seen news articles of organizations that have fell prey to this. You know, you think about your USA Gymnastics, USA Swimming, Penn States. The list, unfortunately, goes on. So we decided to pick up the torch and act as a repository for allowing athletes, coaches, or parents to anonymously or privately report abuse incidents. And then we would act as a third party in investigating those incidents. So that was the first 4 years of Players Health. We acted as the risk management arm of the organization. And as you can imagine, we're seeing kind of the best and the worst of youth sports, and we're helping organizations respond properly, but thinking about the health and safety of these athletes as the number one priority above the scoreboard.
Yeah, it's amazing how much has to go into thinking through the sort of the back end of what happens around youth sports. You do read about the articles in the newspaper and you just scratch your head and think, how could that happen? I mean, you've got
Oh,
all these
it's
parents who for
heartbreaking.
at least eyes and ears are on the street to see what's happening with their own kids, but you just can't be there all the time. And it is heartbreaking, and it does change their life, and they become a different person. And maybe they, have mental health issues down the road, whether it's depression
Absolutely.
or, different ailments that come out of it, anxieties. Um, so that's a great sort of foundation platform there. Talk a little bit about the type of organizations that you work with across the U.S. Now we're talking about youth. So what type of sports do you support, and what are kind of the parenting companies of those sports that you support
Absolutely.
today?
And so when you think about youth sports, think of your Little League, Pop Warner. These are organizations that we're all very familiar with, but there's over 400,000 youth sports organizations in the United States that represent close to 60 million athletes that are playing sports every day. And the market's massive. I think the most recent update, it's over a $10 billion market, youth sports is, and it's
Wow.
growing. And so when we think about the organizations we support, we're supporting those 400,000 organizations. But the way we went to market originally was that we went whale hunting. We went after large national organizations. So US Youth Soccer is one of our clients. We write 42 of the 54 state soccer associations. We write, USA Cheer. We write USA Boxing, USA Softball. Like these large national organizations have thousands of organizations within them. They sell membership too. And to be a part of a member, you get access to insurance and services and governance, and all of that's provided by the national organization. So we went after the large national organizations. So today we support over 20,000 sports organizations. We write 75% of soccer in the United States. We write all of flag football, mostly in the United States. We write 3,000 gymnastics clubs. There's so many organizations, but there's not a sport that we don't write or support. And we're doing that in both US and Canada.
So when I think about professional sports, I think the NFL, I think the MLB, I think, US tennis, but they all have youth organizations that kind of roll up to them. So what are your tie-ins to sort of the bigger brand professional sporting team
That's a really good point.
organizations?
So we actually write all of the professional leagues, their youth sports programming. So we do all of NFL Flag. We do all NBA juniors. We do MLS Next or MLS Go. There's MLB butt pass hit. Like all of their youth sports programming, tournaments, activations, we do the insurance, athlete safety for a lot of those events. And those relationships came through just us focusing on athlete safety. So these are large organizations with massive brands, and they have a lot to lose if these things aren't managed properly at the youth level. And they wanted to bring us as an organization. It wasn't around insurance, which I know we'll get to. The foundation of Players Health and getting a lot of these large national organizations or professional organizations where we need someone that can do it right and help us implement these policies and protocols. That was the foundation of us getting all of these larger accounts.
Got it. And when you say right, tell the listeners what you mean by when you say right
Yeah, so
for these organizations.
we're actually an insurance company today. If someone would have asked me 10 years ago, would you be selling insurance? I don't know what I would have said. I probably would have laughed, and it would have been the furthest things from my mind. But yeah, Players Health today is an insurance company. We write gross premium for a lot of these organizations. So we sell them general liability, participant accident, crime, D&O, cyber, property, all of their commercial insurance we provide for them. Now we're a different insurance company, and that was the idea. In that 4 years into this, we realized we collect a massive amount of data on how organizations are caring for the health and safety of athletes, what they're doing good and what they're not doing good at. And we recognized that there was a correlation to the amount of claims that these organizations would have. So if we're trying to prevent abuse incidents from happening, and we're doing a good job at doing that, and we're seeing organizations that are having these massive claims and insurance companies are paying out the claims for it, it'd be a good idea for a carrier to have access to this data. And that was my original pitch. I started talking to carriers saying, hey, we have all this data. As a carrier that has access to this, you probably want to get ahead of the claim, because once a claim happens, it's already too late. And so that was our entryway into insurance. We were licensing our technology to carriers so that they can offer our technology for free for these organizations to implement. And then we ultimately decided it was going to be best that we do it ourselves. Like we love this industry, that like we live and breathe it. And so we created a different insurance company. So we set up an insurance brokerage, and then we set up what is called a managing general agent, or MGA. Think of us as a quasi carrier. We're an underwriter that underwrites on behalf of a larger carrier. But we are the insurance company providing the insurance to all of these organizations.
Talk to us about 4 years ago when the idea really started about transforming or transitioning into adding an insurance arm to the company. Where were you at from an employee perspective? Where were you at from a revenue perspective? And where are you at today and as we end the year?
Yeah, it's definitely day and night. So at that time, it was pretty bleak, I think, to be quite honest. Honestly, a lot of these organizations, we realized that youth and amateur sports organizations, one, they don't have a lot of money. And so if they're going to spend any money, it's going to be on things that they absolutely need to run a sports org. So background checks, yes, but injury management software, maybe, maybe not. That's a nice to have. So any nice to haves, it's going to be really hard for them to implement. They all want to implement it, but they can't afford to. And so we were at a point where I think we had generated $80,000, $90,000 in revenue at that point. I was out of cash. I was still trying to fundraise and get an institutional fund to look at players' health and build it into a bigger business, but we didn't have the business model to do that. And so I realized at this point, Ty, you had never become you had never been an administrator of a sports org. So I decided to volunteer as a sports administrator for 2 years. It was the Apple Valley Athletic Association here in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Sat on the board, and I was our risk manager. I ran all our background checks and did all of our stuff, and realized, what an administrator really has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And during that time, our insurance premiums doubled. And I was really curious, like, how could our premiums go up when I'm implementing all of these new policies and protocols? We haven't had any claims. And so that's when it hit me. Insurance companies really care about this data. And I started talking to our insurance broker, asking why our insurance premiums doubled. And he was like, well, the market's seeing all of these insurance claims around abuse, and like the carriers are getting scared, and like the rates are going up because a lot of carriers are deciding not to write youth sports anymore because they can't predict when the next USA Gymnastics is going to happen. That was his response to me. And the light bulb really, it hit me. It was like, here it is, players' health. The first 4 years have been 100% focused on safety for these kids, understanding how we can implement policies and protocols to reduce incidents. And those incidents are leading to claims. And so at that time, I started presenting a different value prop. Here is a new insurance company that uses data to underwrite and price risk. All of these carriers are leaving the space. It's dramatically impacting the cost of insurance in youth sports. Because at that time, we went from like 20 carriers that write liability insurance in youth sports. Now they're only about a handful now. So when you have a contraction of the market like that, prices skyrocket. So insurance premiums start, on average, organizations were seeing 30, 40, sometimes 100% rate increases on the same coverage, if not less coverage. And that is impacting accessibility. So most parents don't know, we don't know this, but a portion of our registration is paying for insurance. And so if insurance goes up, registration goes up. And I go back to where I grew up. My mom made $30,000 a year. She was a lunchroom manager. There's no way she would be able to afford what I pay for my son to play travel basketball today, including hotels and all of these other things. So accessibility is really important, and the cost of insurance is being passed down to the parent. And so our focus was really, how do we help get insurance carriers to care about what we do? And then how would we build a business around that? And then honestly, I went on a 2-year journey of learning everything I could about insurance. And then I started talking to more investors around what this new idea could be, and was able to successfully raise a Series A. We raised $4.5 million at that point. We built an MVP. We got the market. As I shared, as you shared, we did $1 million of premium in our first year, 6.7 million our second year, 35 million last year. And this year we broke over 50 million this year.
That's amazing. Yeah. What a story. I just, you got to use the resources you have. You don't always have them, and you have to be resourceful. And you taking the time to dive into the trenches, to be an administrator, and then also really do the research, what it's like to run an insurance company, or all the intricacies behind it. I mean, insurance is something you need and we all have in different areas, but it just seems like a black box sometimes. You don't really
Oh,
know how it works.
absolutely.
You don't understand how much it costs. You don't use it until you need it. And then once you use it one time, your rates go up. So you don't want to use it. And there's all sorts of, unknowns in that space. But certainly, I love the model, and I also love the industry. I mean, if you think of, Berkshire Hathaway and Geico and
Right.
all these companies that they own, it's, products that you need, not nice to haves, and also reoccurring, which is the beauty about insurances. So that's incredible. So 4 years ago, you see the revenue go up. How much money did you raise in your Series A or to date so far? And how big employee wise are you today as well?
Yeah. So today we've raised over 40 million. We did a $4 million Series A. I mean, we'll call it a seed round. Our A was about 10, and then we did a $30 million, and that was 2 years ago. And so
Yeah.
the employee base grew as well. But honestly, it didn't grow initially. We went from like two of us, me and my co-founder Chris. It was us for a long time. We would bump up to maybe 6 or 7 employees, and there were some market adjustments. Um, we had to survive COVID. Running a sports business and insurance during COVID, really tough. So we were about 12 people going into that series, that seed, and that A. We raised 30 million. We're about 55 to 60 employees now.
That's great. The path of where you're at and where you started was lots of left and right decisions, choices, and directions. If you were to do it all over again, I know you're still a young company, what would you have done differently?
There's so much I would do. I think the biggest thing that I would do, and it's now just an awareness that I have around fundraising and use of capital and your motivations to fundraise. If I didn't know what Players Health was going to be before I started fundraising, and I think that's a big mistake that a lot of young founders make, and that you have a great idea, you're getting some validation in the marketplace, and you're assuming that that's the validation needed to go and raise capital. And if you're charismatic, you know, you're a people person and you can hit the pavement, you'll raise capital. But doing that prematurely puts you on a path to grow with maybe not the right incentives to grow. And so the way I'll re-describe that is when I first started, I raised 3.5 million in kind of a friends and family round, call it team interval, pre to Players Health, like year 2, year 3. I had no idea what this business could be. I had a bunch of ideas around what it could be, but I wasn't set on it. I was still tweaking. That's a lot of money to raise, not having a firm business model, not having repeatable sales that's coming in. And so I pivoted 50 times to our first institutional raise. And yes, once we raised our institutional, maybe there was a couple pivots, but they weren't as drastic. And the growth was a lot more, it was a lot more sustainable in terms of the growth because I had a real business and I knew exactly what this business could be. So if I gave up a ton of equity along the way because I didn't know what we were going to be, I was incentivized. Sometimes it was a disadvantage because I was on the growth train. Once you take outside capital, you're signing up for growth. And sometimes whatever cash you get in at that point, you're just happy to get revenue and you're going to keep running down that path. And that could be a dead end. That may not take you to that outcome or the exit that gets you to a 9-figure exit. But you got some cash, you got some validation, and you want to just show revenue growth. What I would have done is I would have waited. I would have cash flowed the business as far as I possibly could on my own, worked a second job, did whatever I could to validate the business model and understand exactly what I was building, and then I would have raised outside capital. And it would have been a lot less painstaking. I would have given up less equity along the way. And I think it would have allowed me to I wouldn't have wasted as much capital along the way as well. So I think there's a waste. Of course, there's learning and things you can do that you take along the way, but I think you want to be really thoughtful about the amount of capital you raise before you understand where the business is going to be.
Yeah, really insightful. A lot of companies we work with come out of Y Combinator and Techstars and are bootstrapped and they raise capital, and sometimes it's too much too soon. They give up too much. There's one of our guest speakers, or one of our guests in the episode a few months back. His name's Don Muir. He's the CEO of a company called ARC. He came out of Stanford, and they created this fintech company where you can raise capital, you can get capital without giving up equity. So you need $10 million and you're a company that generates a certain amount of revenue. They kind of take that into consideration, look at your risk profile, and really it's another option to have the funds you need to scale, but not give up as much equity. And so there's a lot of innovation happening in that space. So interesting to hear that. Today, as you continue to grow and you look at the future, I mean, it seems like I don't know, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of competition in what you're providing. Like why would a youth organization use your service versus like another insurance carrier? Yeah. Are there other options out there, or what's it look like for you on the competitive landscape?
There's a few other options. I think the biggest difference between us and a competitor is that we're not just peddling policies. And I think everyone's, call it, perception of the insurance industry, most people would say it's a negative one because the trust, and there are a myriad of factors why people would say that. I think one of the things that we're doing differently is that there's been insurance companies that have existed in sports, sold insurance to these organizations for decades, and they sold them a policy, didn't help them manage the risk, and just watched the rates go up. And now these organizations are just left trying to pick up the pieces. We believe that as an organization, it's in our best interest to make sure that we help you create a safe environment. If that is 100% our mission, the more on mission we are, the more money we can make. And that's ultimately our business. That's how our system works. So if you implement risk management, you implement policies and protocols, this keeps your incidents down, which manages your cost. Now your rates aren't going up because you're not having all these incidents, you're not having all these lawsuits, which ultimately keeps your rates either flat or you get discounts as you implement. And for us, the less claims you have, the more money we make. That's the dramatic difference. And then it's the way we look at an organization, the way we underwrite. Most of everyone in our space, they look at the previous 10 years of claims and they go, hey, you haven't had any claims. You're a good risk. Well, what we've known and what we learned over the course of the past 10 years, that's not a good indicator to a good sports organization. USA Gymnastics, perfect example. Decades went by, really good risk, no claims. Well, what mechanism did you have to understand incidents that were reported? Like how is the organization internally managing these incidents before they actually become a lawsuit? And then they didn't just get one lawsuit, they got multiple lawsuits that became one class action lawsuit at a moment in time that looked back over 30 years. If I was a carrier, yes, they were a good risk. But all of the incidents along the way, if they would have had players' health, they would have had a leading indicator to get ahead of the incidents, stop the bleeding before it became these massive claims. And that's the biggest value add that I think we have, is that we help our organizations get ahead of the claim by focusing on mission. The more on mission we are, the more money we make, the more organizations save, the more safer these kids are going to be. And so it's truly a win-win. I think there are very few companies that could say we can do good and do well. We definitely have that business model. And none of our competitors can say they have the technology, the industry expertise, and the passion that we have to create change in this space that's not directly tied to a dollar amount.
Okay, great. Yeah, system paused a little bit. We captured everything there. That was great. Yeah, no worries. Okay, I just love what you've created. How has building and growing players' health over the years changed you?
That's a really good question. I think in the beginning, when I first started this business, my nature, I want to share love. I want to create things that are going to be good for people, that are going to help and solve problems. And so when I had more of a, call it, philanthropic lens to how I build a business, not recognizing that in order for me to make the biggest impact, I have to generate revenue and build a sustainable business model along the way. So it can't just be all I want to give everything away. And because if I continue to do that and not have our cup fill along the way, we won't have enough to give. And so I think over time, I recognize that, yes, as philanthropic as I am, as on mission as I am for what we're doing, we need to build a sustainable business model that generates revenue, that has strong financial controls, that allows us to build a business that can have the massive impact. We have to be everywhere. In order for that case, we got to build a big business. So financial infrastructure is really important. And I don't think I really valued that in the beginning. It was just, I was heart led and I wanted to build this business. And as I've now matured, and I'm still maturing, still learning, I'm now understanding the importance of being a good steward over investment capital, being a good steward over expenses and our people. And I think stewardship is what has helped me through building this business, and that I'm a way better steward over the resources that I've been given to ensure that we can be fruitful. And so it's been, I'm happy that the process is not over, but I think in the beginning it was just like, I need to give everything. Now I recognize you need to be a good steward over these resources so that you have more to give along the way.
I love that message. We're going to just, I don't know if you're wanting to share this, but I know that we talked previously and you're launching a podcast here coming up pretty soon. And you want to share a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah. Well, everyone's been telling me like, Ty, you need to write a book or like do a podcast or whatever it is. But I wanted to make sure that it was really unique to who I am. So I've been an athlete my whole life, but also faith plays a huge role in my life as well. And that there's a common theme in terms of my relationship with the Father that I want to share. And I recognize that there were points in my life where maybe I was walking a certain way and I wasn't doing things that I thought I should have been. And ultimately, I found out that faith, it always come back to my faith. So I'm launching this podcast called Trophy Testimonies. And I have a massive network of professional athletes, college athletes that all have, that are in their sports and they're living out their faith through their sports and using their sports platform for the good. But there was always a moment in our life where we were playing for the trophies. We were playing for the cars, the money, the clothes, the women. And at some point, we realized that life is bigger than that. And our faith really became our foundation. So I'm excited to launch this podcast. I got so many professional and collegiate athletes that are going to be sharing their stories, their testimony, so to speak. I'll be sharing mine, of course. But yeah, it goes back to me living in my personal mission. Like everyone in our company at Players Health has their own personal mission. So yes, we have a company mission, which is to create the safest and most accessible environment for an athlete to play the sport that they love. But it's important that we all live in our personal mission. And this is what gets me up out of bed every day. So I want to create a world of love, acceptance, and safety. I do that through courageous leadership, empathy, and using my voice. That podcast, Players Health, like my whole role that I occupy in Players Health is me living on mission every day. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, if you are open and if the audience is open to listening, yeah, we'll have our first episode coming out first week of March. It'd be great to have you guys tune in.
Yeah, that'd be great. I see behind you Randy Moss's jersey, and don't know if you have any connection to him, but obviously professional athlete we all know and love.
Well, yeah, I live in Minnesota, and Randy Moss, his time in Minnesota is legendary. And I'm 6'5", you probably can't tell, but I was a tall wide receiver, and I was fast. And I was running 4.3s when I was around my 40, so I was a fast receiver, and I modeled my game after Randy Moss. Randy Moss, Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Johnson. Those are the three, and they're all 6'4", 6'3", 6'5", big. I was like a 200-pound receiver. So I definitely idolize Randy Moss from a sports perspective for sure.
That's great. In terms of the guests, sounds like they're going to be a lot of athletes and sharing their stories. Don't know if you have anybody you want to kind of share on now, or maybe we'll just wait till you start promoting it. But I know that there's, whatever your belief is. And again, I'm not here to tell you what to believe in. I happen to be a Christian, but higher power, whatever you want, whatever you believe in. There's so many athletes that you can see on their jersey, or they paint it on their wrists, or they have tattoos of whatever they believe in. And it is about the story behind how they got to where they're at. And we don't hear those stories. We just see the good life. There's a lot that goes on in between the beginning and the end. And to me, that's a really interesting platform to be able to understand and hear the stories that others can relate to, that are in the trenches, that are going through things. So really excited about your podcast. Certainly we'll plug it when it's coming out. Just let us know. Tyrre, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing your story, and more importantly, the inspiration behind why you're doing what you're doing. I think it's going to make a big difference, and can't wait to catch up with you in 6, 12, 14 months to see how things are going, have you back on the show as requested, as if you want. I also want to thank the listeners today for listening. It means the world to me that you spent your time with us. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal. Hope you have a great holiday. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll catch up with you on the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible, and for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.